Hello, everyone, and welcome to Screenworks. I'm John Uriarte, curator of Screenworks at the Photographers Gallery in London. Screenworks is a fortnightly series of live stream events by Fotomuseum Winterthur in Switzerland and the Photographers Gallery in London. Together, we aim to keep exploring the changing role of the photographic image within the network visual culture. Each event is led by an artist, researcher, or a curator who takes the audience to the spaces where their core practice takes place. Screenworks can be a live performance, a peek behind the scenes of an artwork, or a guided online tour among other many formats. We have hosted more than 60 Screenworks so far. You can find video recordings of each of them on our website or on our YouTube channel. Please remember that if you have found Screenworks useful for your professional or personal interests, consider subscribing to folders for €7, around £6 per month. You will support the program and its artists, and also get your personalized folder on folders.screenworks.com. There you will receive files and extra content from the artists and researchers of Screenworks. Some housekeeping information now. Your microphone should be muted to avoid noise disturbances. If that's not the case, please mute it now. And as I just mentioned, we are recording and we will be archiving this event. Please use the public chat to send any comment or questions, or alternatively, send a private message to Marco, Fotomuseum Winterthur, or to me.
Hello from me too. I'm Marco De Mutis, digital curator at Fotomuseum Winterthur. But tonight, John and I are also excited to wear the uniform of flight attendants and join a very special flight. In fact, we'll be led by game scholars turned pilots, Sebastian Möring and Ida Kathrine Hammeleff Jørgensen, to the skies of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So Microsoft Flight Simulator is a series of flight simulator programs which date back to 1982, more than 40 years ago, making it the longest running software product line for Microsoft, predating Windows by 3 years. And it's also one of the longest running PC video game series of all time. The latest title in the franchise was launched in 2020 and received extremely positive reactions by players and fans from the large community of the flight simulation software. In a moment of global restriction of mobility during the pandemic, the game also allowed players to simulate an experience that was inaccessible at the time, and it's still to be avoided for environmental reasons, flying around the planet. Flight Simulator is particularly interesting for those of us looking at digital and networked images, for the technical marvel and painstaking amount of polish in photorealism. The conceit of real-life simulation and photorealism is a major theme in the game industry, and the 2007 words of Tim Sweeney, the founder of Epic Games, sound prophetic. Games, he claimed, will be absolutely photorealistic within the next 10 years with an indistinguishable from reality level of graphics. That was the claim in 2017, so we still have 4 years to see the results. But at the moment, the photographic quality of computer-generated images is only matched by the realism of details that are mapped to live data from the physical worlds and the community of third-party developers who create add-ons and plugins for the game. AI traffic simulates the route of vehicles in real time. Scenery add-ons replace airports and specific regions of the world with more detailed replicas. Alfred Korzybski reminded us that the map is not the territory, and yet the 10+ million players enthusiasts in the skies of flight simulators might make us question if the territory itself isn't somehow shaking, and the lines between the two might start to blur. Today, throughout their flight from Berlin to Copenhagen, two researchers will discuss realism and abstraction, models, simulations, and representation in games and game research. Finally, this screen walk also marks the first episode of Sebastian Möring's new series, A Lift Home, talking game research at 36,000 feet above sea level. So make sure to follow his next flights after this one. So before we begin, and as we complete boarding on our flight, let me introduce you our pilots. Ida Kathrine Hammeleff Jørgensen is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Southern Denmark. Her research interests revolve around games as media, realism and abstraction in games, representational conventions, and the representation of gender in games. Ida holds a PhD in game studies from the IT University of Copenhagen, where she developed a theory for analyzing games as models building on intermediate theory. Sebastian Möring is an assistant professor in European Media Studies, a joint study program of the University of Potsdam and the University of Applied Sciences, Potsdam, Germany, and head coordinator of the DIGAREC, Digital Games Research Center of the University of Potsdam. His research focuses on the philosophy and aesthetics of computer games, in-game photography, green game studies, and games in educational context. Okay, cabin crew, boarding complete. Dear Ida and Sebastian, the screen is yours.
All of a sudden, I'm dealing with so many screens that I have difficulties to find the real screen. Thank you very much, everyone, for inviting us and for allowing us to be here and to try this, what I would probably consider experiment for now. So I'll first get back into, I'm a bit excited, obviously, because this is something that I've been thinking of and a bit like dreaming of doing, and now this is becoming a reality. And while I'm doing this, I can't believe that I'm actually doing this. So that's really good. So to give you some context, we will be using the just described flight simulator that for some reason I can't see my mouse. So now we are on the flight deck at Berlin-Brandenburg Airport. So I took a parking position, which makes clear that everyone can see where we are at. We are right in front of the sign of Berlin-Brandenburg Airport. And to give you sort of some context, while I'm also trying to set up the plane, I'll tell you something about how I came to do what I'm going to do. So I'm actually taking this up a bit from Marco. Like during COVID, I think I probably took my flight simming pilot license because that was the best way to travel during lockdown. It also is a bit like reminiscent of I've did some research. Nobody talks about Jamiroquai anymore, but they had an album that was called Traveling Without Moving. And this was a bit like what I keep thinking about when I do flight simulation. For my training, I watch plenty of YouTube videos. And so you should absolutely feel safe flying with me today from Berlin to Copenhagen. I ended up buying some scenery add-ons, like for instance, the Copenhagen airport or the old Berlin Tegel airport that's now closed. And it all grew. I became really involved into this, like flying, watched tons of YouTube videos and figured out that there's a whole like scene of flight simming out there. I got like this peripheral interfaces now, like a real throttle and a real joystick that I'm going to use to fly, all these kinds of things. And as you can imagine, this like got a bit out of hand, right? So because of being a game scholar, I needed to find a way to integrate flight simming into my work routine, right? It's really hard to keep your virtual pilot's license. You have to do continuous flights, right? But while having like this really demanding academic job, it's really hard to like work these two jobs at the same time. So I needed to integrate flight simming into my work routine. And so I thought it may be interesting to use flight simulation as like a context within which we can have like discussions about like games or about like simulation, because I figured that everyone whom I'm showing this like sort of flight simulator is like gets really hooked real quick. And this is where my guest comes in, and you're like I announce you as like the premium passenger of today, Ida Jørgensen. And the story goes such that you're stuck in Berlin and you want to get home, right? So it's a little bit like, I'm also thinking of this as like a version of carpool karaoke, but on a plane. So what we gonna do is, while in the air, we were gonna sing a couple of songs from your latest album.
Of course, yeah.
And your EPs. So maybe let's see how that works. But I'm flying you to Copenhagen, which happens to be the place where you're from.
Or where
or where you live. Yes, right. True. You're from Denmark, but not from Copenhagen. But now you live in Copenhagen, and which also happens to be like one of the really like core places of game research in the world, actually. So this is like this is sort of somehow also symbolical in a way, if you're studying computer games. For those who don't know what it means to study computer games, there are many like really great research centers in the world, but one of the early ones and of the great ones was in Copenhagen as well. So somehow it also makes sense to fly to Copenhagen. And I also thought like it's really good to have you on this flight, because you dealt with simulation and you're dealing with representation in your work. So I'm thinking maybe we can use this like time we have during the flight to also try to find out what's so fascinating about flight simulation. Or is there something? Is it maybe so where does this fascination come from, and to whom is it fascinating, and these kinds of things. So that's like the little intro. You've already been introduced with your background, right? So that's fine. So what I'm going to do now is I need to set up the plane now, right? So the people are waiting, they want to get on the plane, so we need to set it up. And to do so, what you can see here is like you can see what I show you, right?
Yeah.
So I will first connect the bridge, obviously, so for people to be able to enter the plane. It's coming there. And we need to do a bit of button switching. So we are, for those for whom this is too fast, there's like an upper panel, and this is where you start pushing buttons in order to start the plane. And I chose the A320neo because, like, I'm not sure if flight simmers are going to hate me for this, because I feel like this is the most simple airliner to start up. So it's a bit of button switching, but not too much compared to others. So what we're going to do is, like, we need to start with the batteries, and we need to turn on the external power. So you can probably hear already some sounds in the background, right? So there's some checkup sounds, then you hear some ventilators. We need to turn on the nav, which is the stuff up here. So we have 3 navigational systems. So if one like breaks, we still have the others to rely on in order to actually get where we want to get to. You also need to do which is very important for you and for me as well as for the others, is we need to put on the oxygen supply for the crew. And that's really important. We need to turn on the emergency lights, right? So in case something happens, but so far nothing has happened yet. So I'm still in this flight simulation business, and I can still fly, so that's fine. There's a thing that's the fuel pumps you need to make running, right? In order to get the fuel into the engines, you need to turn on the fuel pumps. You don't need to keep all of that in mind. I'm just saying what I'm doing here. So,
I guess for context, I should mention that I have not played Flight Simulator before. This is very new to me.
That's very good, because that would have been my first question, actually. So what is actually your relationship to games in general? How would you describe that? And then to flight simulators or to simulations specifically. I keep switching buttons, but maybe you want to say something.
Yeah, I guess like my relationship with games is good. You know, this is how I make my paycheck. You know, researching games, so of course it's good, but also ambivalent in a way, right? Because it's such a it's such a charged concept, and we have so many ideas about, you know, what constitutes a proper game, and I think we will talk about that also, and what constitutes proper use. And I am not the kind of gamer who spends 200 hours in a game, and I haven't got like very expensive hardware or anything like that. So I'm like what is sometimes described as a casual gamer, I guess. So, but I would say that that is, you know, also a completely sort of perfect qualification to be a game researcher.
I mean, absolutely, right? It would be weird if it was only for like super expert players. Then would be a very like niche discourse that you would end up having.
But I think this is sometimes assumed, right? That, you know, if you are a games researcher, you're also like a hardcore gamer, and I'm not, definitely not.
Yeah. I'll now let the people enter the plane. You can see this fill up. It's like you can choose between instant filling up. So we will be fully packed, 174 passengers. You can choose between instant, between fast, and it takes about like 3 minutes, or between real, which is 15 minutes. So I'm now taking...
Which is still fast, I think.
Yes, you can have a really quick turnaround in an airplane. If you've taken a low-cost carrier recently, then you probably know that they have really quick turnarounds as well. So yep. So what I did in the meantime is like I checked there's a real flight plan in the background. So which says, for instance, how many passengers we have, how much cargo, extra cargo we are carrying, and also where we are going to. So today we are flying.
What do you use all this information for?
You need to do that in order to actually feed the autopilot. So, because obviously I need the autopilots to fly all the way to Copenhagen, and that's also what professional pilots would be doing. They need to feed the autopilot, and the autopilot needs to know like every detail in order to be able to carry you where you want to be carried to.
And you have to manually put that into the system.
I've sort of prepared it. So that's the fun thing with Flight Simulator, and this is where I think so. What you're interested in flight simulation is, and we've talked about that before. It's not only in the simulator itself, or like the program itself in its own right, but also the context in which it exists.
Yeah.
And I think this is extremely interesting with Flight Simulator, because Flight Simulator is, I think, just a platform. And you have tons of other programs attached to it. Like that's a whole like media ecology around it. Like there's a whole air traffic control network that you can use when you're playing Flight Simulator. And I'm saying this because there's also like a system where you like another program that you use to actually calculate the flight plan. And this is where I'm getting the information now to not type it all in manually, but just a few things. So. The program is called SimBrief. So now we are flying from Berlin to Copenhagen. Those are like the actual codes. Our flight number, I have to type it in here, so that's still empty. And like SK is for SAS, and 0815 is like the most random number you can have in German saying. It's like 0815. And so we're gonna have that. Then you also need to say something about, see, have you heard it? Boarding is completed now. So now it's really about us to be quick. And you type in the zero fuel weight, for instance, so how heavy your plane would be if there's no fuel on board. You also type in how much fuel you're gonna have. So that's 2.5 usually means 2,500 kilograms.
From the flight deck, on behalf of myself, your captain, the first officer, and cabin crew, I'd like to take this time to welcome you aboard our flight. We're just wrapping up some paperwork up front here and waiting to receive final numbers from the ground crew, then we'll be on our way. Flight attendants will be coming through the cabin shortly with a very important safety briefing. We do ask that you give them your full, undivided attention as they review the safety operations of this Airbus aircraft. We do appreciate your business having you aboard this flight. If there's anything we do to make your flight any more enjoyable, please don't hesitate to ask. Welcome aboard.
So this is where the simulation breaks a little bit, because that's what I should have actually said. But that's always coming with this
With a very sort of significantly indistinct accent.
Yeah. Luckily not too German accent, so I'm also
okay.
like, oh, I did something wrong actually. I needed to take some fuel out because we had too much fuel on board, so I need to change the numbers here. I'm not sure if that works. Okay, so that's where we can always say like, oh, luckily it's just a simulation, so nothing too much will go wrong if the numbers are not fully correct. But I would probably in the real flight simming community, this would not be appreciated what I'm doing now. So all right, so I think now we can feel like the weather is quite fine actually, so we should not expect too many turbulences, or probably not at all, and we'll just need the jet bridge to disconnect, which it is doing, I hope. Yeah. And then we should soon be ready to go. Okay, and I guess this is also the whole complex thing with like this stream, is like, how do you have a conversation while you have to configure an airplane at the same time, which in itself is like sort of interesting as well. So now we have to talk to the built-in ATC air traffic control and ask about like departure.
From Scandinavian Sierra Alpha Sierra 0815 with Quebec request taxi for takeoff straight out departure.
Scandinavian Sierra Alpha Sierra 0815 taxi to and hold short of runway 25 left via taxiway Victor 2 Alpha Mike 9er. Contact tower on 118.855 when ready.
Okay, that was expected, I guess. So we are flying out west, but then we are turning via the south side of Berlin all the way to the east and going from east of Berlin all the way up to like Denmark. And I think we fly a bit over Fyn, and then we'll take a right turn towards like Copenhagen or towards Amager, where the Kastrup airport is situated, right?
Are we flying over Malmö?
That I'm not really sure, to be honest. So we need to see that. Okay. So I need to get the we now get to the pushback. I need to call the TAC, and probably we also need to turn on some lights.
I like the takeaway cup.
You like what?
I like that there's the takeaway coffee cup, and I also feel like it's I feel a bit insecure that it's placed where it is.
I can tell you something about these coffee cups. That's actually quite something.
Far away from the. Okay, good.
So now we are on our way to the runway, and what we should not forget is like to turn on the. Oh, we have already turned on the engines. Oh yeah, it's because the real world switches were already turned on. So
what happens if you forget any of these things, Sebastian?
It's if you forget any of these things, that can actually end up in you not being able to do anything, because you need to do the exact number of steps in the exact correct order in order to actually arrive somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's like you can I feel it's a little bit like programming, really, like you're really configuring like an airplane, like a software in a way. And if you that's like I think that's what I hear from programmers when they talk about like trying to find a bug or something. They can sit in front of that forever.
Yeah.
And also the simulation thinks we have finished, and the flight's over, but I think we will just continue.
take a moment out to locate your crew suspected and remember it may be behind you. If there
All
is
right.
change in cabin pressure for
So we'll also need to switch the flaps to number 1. That's also what I've almost forgot to do. We need to type in some performance measures. And we need to tell the TARC that they can leave us now. So sorry. And then we have like 3 kinds of speeds, like velocity 1. That's the speed. If you haven't reached that yet, you still have enough space on the runway to actually brake. VR is the speed where you have to rotate, where you're taking off. And V2 is the speed where you definitely have to go flying, even in case of something problematic happens. You have to go into the air, and then you have to take other procedures in order to actually save whatever can still be saved of your plane. All right, so now we're going you see there's like other airlines waiting already to get into our slot probably, and we need to go.
And are they other players, or how does it work?
They are like currently this is another program that I've plugged in, which is taking like real world flights from Flight Radar 24. So this is all literally happening right now. So at least it's supposed to be happening right now at Berlin Airport. So yeah.
But they still manage to fit you in.
Sort of, yeah. You have to. I mean, there's all the procedures that are going, right? So there's like these very strict procedures, and you somehow have to play by the rules, literally. And this is maybe something where we could talk about games as well, and games and play, because I feel like so there's like, I don't know. Like there's people who say like this is a flight simulator, this is not a game, right? So where would you say, is there a distinction between like maybe simulation as a concept, maybe a flight simulator as like a specific kind of program, and a game?
So of course, simulation is a much broader concept, right? You can have all kinds of simulations that has nothing to do with games. But then some of them we also call games, because we consider operating them playing. But for me, that's just like a discursive distinction.
It's so what does it mean, just a discursive distinction?
And that just means that this is like you could take some kind of scientific simulation, and you would still be able to say that you play it if you operate it somehow, right?
Yeah.
There's no formal distinction in my mind. At least no distinction that is important in regards to issues of representation, right? There might be like other aspects of games where it would be important to make that distinction, but as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't have anything to do with its capacity to represent whether it's a game or it's a simulation. So I would be fine with calling this a game. I would also be totally fine with people saying it's not a game. I don't mind.
Okay.
Do you think there's?
So yeah, I'm like, so sometimes I'm thinking of there's like this distinction in game studies, or that's been a recent development, right? Where there's this kind of thing. Okay, sorry, like this is really complex. I was requesting to taxi, and we had requested that, right? So
Ground Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815 with Quebec request taxi for takeoff departing straight out.
Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815 taxi to and hold short of runway 25 left using taxiway Mike Niner. Contact tower on 118.855.
Okay, there's a lot of numbers that we need to...
Taxiing hold short runway 25 left using taxiway Mike Niner Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815.
So actually it should tell us now that we can go onto the runway. But let's just...
Tower Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815 ready for departing straight out at runway 25 left.
Austrian 2 Juliet Alpha contact Berlin Center on 125.8. Good day. Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815 line up and wait.
Okay, we're now supposed to wait.
Okay.
Going to 125.8 Austrian 2 Juliet Alpha.
No, what I was thinking about is there's in an interesting way this flight simulator is that's why we have to wait, because there's someone else already waiting to start. As a flight simulator,
Sierra Kilo 0815 acknowledge last transmission.
Is this us? Oh yeah.
Line up and wait Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815.
Like I feel like the flight simulator is interestingly like a walking simulator in a weird way, because you're not collecting many things. Your performance is not really measured in a way. Even when you're playing crashes, it's not really breaking apart or something, but the screen is just going black. So,
but wouldn't you? Yeah.
And that's where some people used to say those games are not games because there's no challenge in a way.
No,
although
but No, I agree. There's probably no. Well, there's plenty of challenge. There's plenty of things I would have to master in order to fly this plane to Copenhagen. But of course, it's not the same kind of challenge that you would have in many games. However, I think that assumes that you're sort of like always, first of all, that you are motivated by these kind of reward systems that some games install, and also that you don't account for, I'm a very bad player of many games, but when I die, I just respawn and then I continue. So for me, like I can see, of course, there is a consequence to my failure, but it's not really a permanent consequence, if you know what I mean, right? I can just start over. I can look up some walkthrough, and I can be assisted in what I'm doing. So I think at least it sort of assumes that distinction, that you only account for like some kind of very intended use. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I'm currently regretting that I plugged in like this real world traffic, because this is like taking so long. So I will just show you what happens when you just don't play by the rules. And it's true, and it's even though you can't die, you can still fail in the flight simulator, right? You can fail to turn the whole thing on, and it's like, and that's.
Alpine 4633, wind 255 at 7. Clear to land runway 25 left.
I think the sort of distinction
Sierra Kilo
is
0815 altimeter 30.15 wind.
It assumes. I mean, even in of course, there are very difficult games, but in many games there is also an option to just like play on easy mode or story mode or whatever they call it, and then you can turn almost any game into a walking simulator, right?
Yeah, that's true. I just heard the ATC and they approved us departing, even though there's a plane ahead of us. So don't worry, everything will be fine. I'm now giving full speed. Something is wrong, but don't worry. I have no clue what's wrong. But I'm pretty sure it will be all right. So we will soon reach V1 and V rotate. So now we're taking off. So there you can see Berlin Airport. Bye-bye. Oh, we're constantly missing to acknowledge frequency changes.
Berlin approach Scandinavian
need to be
Sierra
careful
Kilo
with that.
0815.
I'm switching on the autopilot now.
2 miles southwest of Schoenfeld, 1,200 feet. Request clearance to transition Charlie airspace.
And I remember that
Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815 Berlin approach. Block 0436.
this plane is not really going to 36,000 feet, but to 32,000 feet. So we will be at like yeah, the actual cruise level. We will probably have that for 5 minutes or so, because Copenhagen is so close that that will take not much time. And still, if you're doing flight simulation, yeah, something is really crazy. So now we're doing the left turn.
Berlin approach Air Baltic 213 is missed approach at Schoenfeld. Air Baltic 213, you are 2 miles northeast.
Okay, I have to figure out what's happening
5,000
currently.
feet, expect ILS runway 25 right approach via Kilo Lima Foxtrot transition. Clear to Kilo Lima Foxtrot. Air Baltic 6 uniform November climb and maintain 8,000 feet.
Okay, we didn't, the autopilot didn't do what it was supposed to do. Okay.
Climb and maintain 8,000 feet. Expect ILS runway.
So, but
right approach
I was
Kilo Lima Foxtrot transition.
I was asking you before, what's your relationship to maybe I'll turn this a bit down. So, what's your relationship to games, and what's your relationship to flight simulation specifically? Or like you already said that your relationship to games is like you're rather into like casual gaming. So flight simulator to me feels like this doesn't belong to the category of casual gaming, right?
I guess not. At least for me, this would be extremely uncasual to play this. But you look relatively casual.
Oh, do I? I'm like completely. I'm
so.
really like exhausted currently. I'm like trying. I'm playing. I feels like I'm playing two really complex games at the same time. One of them is flight simulation, and one of them is like interviewing you and talking to you. And I thought like this would be so. This could be so casual, such a casual conversation. And it turns out, it's really complex.
So I think, of course, Flight Simulator is not a casual game. It's obvious. It is a game that strives for this very, I guess, realistic account of what it means to control an aircraft, and it simulates that in a much detail. So of course it's not a casual thing. I think that's probably, without knowing it, I guess it's probably also one of the sort of thing that motivates people to play it. That you have this expertise that you can go into this hobby where you become an expert and you become really good at it. And that of course differs very much from me playing Mini Metro or what have you on my smartphone, which is a much less demanding game, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, like the there's like still a basic similarity, right? That when you know what to do, when you know how to control it, it sort of functions, right? And that might be different from, say, some kind of don't know, a first-person shooter or something where you would be challenged in a much more dynamic way. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
that you can become an expert, that you can know, you can have such a good basic set of skills to operate this aircraft that it maybe becomes, you know, mundane in a way.
I can tell you, it never does.
Okay, but then at least I would assume that there are like moments where you're casual moments in the game, right? Okay, takeoff and landing, maybe not.
I can tell you right now, I'm calming down slightly because I've done all the configurations necessary. I feel like we're going in the right direction. Now we're going all the way. We're passing like the airport to our right. There we can see it. That's where we took off in the other direction, and now we're going the opposite direction to actually go to where we wanted to go to.
And what is in the among flight simulator enthusiasts? Are there like, would this be a part that you would prefer to skip? So when you've done the difficult part, when you have made your aircraft ready, when you after takeoff, then you know, okay, then I skip the.
Yeah, no. This is what
like skipping dialogue scenes. Or something.
You mean the space in between?
Yeah.
Like between like a takeoff and landing.
Yeah. Or is it something that people also like? Is this an important moment when you are?
This okay, let me say this. So that's a good question because I actually stumbled across a couple of things and I was meaning to make a joke about it. So I'm giving away the joke without it being a joke now. So I thought like, okay, obviously the most important things are like starting up the whole machine, which I didn't used to do. I thought like, this takes so long. This already, for some planes, this already takes half an hour just to push all the knobs and everything in the right order.
Can you automize that part?
Yes.
Okay.
They are like airplanes with like these EFBs, like these electronic flight boards. They you can actually like pre-configure different states of the plane. Like ready to taxi is like or ready for takeoff is like the most advanced that you can then have. But this is like, it seems like this is somehow against what flight simmers are really into. They want to have the full experience. They even want to simulate how many people are on the plane, who of them is sick, which like alternative airports you need to be ready to land at in case there's an emergency. All these, so that it's really like so close to the real that it can easily be confused with it in a way. And there's also like, there's even maybe we'll get to that at some point later. I just mentioned it now. There's even like different kinds of planes that you can purchase for Flight Simulator that have different levels of like verisimilitude, and they are called like the most real ones are called study level. So they are simulated to an extent that you can use them to actually study flying a plane. And for the flight sims, the question was like, obviously, like then also takeoff is super important. Everything until you've configured the plane to an extent where it is on its track as we are now, and then it goes all the way, and then until the descent, right? And that depends on what kind of flights you take. Some people really love, like recently I've seen a couple of videos, people doing long haul flights, like 10 hours. So you have like maybe an hour like configuration takeoff and then being on cruise level. Then you have like 8 hours of like just flying, and then you have another hour of doing all the descent again. So, and that's the joke I wanted to give away, is that I thought like being like, I don't know, like a full-time employed person, you really have little time to play games, which is really unfortunate for computer game scholars because they are supposed to play games, right? And I thought like, so I have hardly time to play on my Switch. But then I thought like, okay, if I keep doing flight simulator, I can just do like a mid-haul or long-haul flight and then use the time in between to actually read a book or play on the Switch. So, or have a conversation about simulation with you now. So that's one of the ideas. And some simmers, actually yesterday I saw somebody who's doing a long haul plus Lego. So what? Lego.
Yeah.
Lego. So they are like bringing the plane in the air, and as soon as it's like in like a state where it can go all the way on its own, they actually start building something in real world Lego on their desk. And that's so that they're being quite creative actually how to use this time in between. Some of them also just switch off their microphone and just let the plane fly for 6 hours, but none I've seen nobody who accelerates time, which would be an easy thing to do as well. So you just accelerate time, and then we are in Copenhagen in like no time. But I think some of them don't do it because it confuses the flight simulator. Somehow this really like it sometimes has difficulties getting back into like the state it was before, because it does tons of calculations in between as well.
So it's easy just to let it run in the background and then do the dishes and then come back to the...
Some people go to school during the day and then they come, that's what kids do. They go to school during the day and then they do the landing when they come home. But that also, of course, means that everything needs to go as planned, right? And some of them even use like TeamViewer or Twitch to actually check if their plane is like, so they have a screen at school where they check if their plane is still fine. Yeah, so that's a bit it.
So what about sorry, I was because you're also interested in in-game photography, right?
Yes.
So is that a thing in Flight Simulator? Do they do like these kind of bird's eye view shots?
You mean like
so that's
this?
also part of the allure of the game.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's something that I've been meaning to talk to you about anyway. I didn't want to talk about in-game photography so much, but so screenshots are like a really solid part of flight simming. But it's very casually, so they're made, but it's not that like, it's a bit like car photography as well, right? So if your plane is like going through a sunset or something, also like the clouds in Flight Simulator are never the same. It really looks different every time, and this I think this is a huge appeal about this thing, and this is why people keep taking screenshots. So screenshotting and flight simulation, I think, are very closely interlinked, but it's not. I haven't really seen like anybody doing like an exhibition of like screenshots or something like that, but it's being like also with regards to the screen walks context in which we are in, and the idea of like the networked image, right? Like they're and I think this is also what probably added to this whole like appeal of flight simulation since it came out, like the new flight simulator since it came out in 2020, is like these images are traveling like everywhere through the whole internet, right? All the time. You can if you look for them, you'll find them. That's definitely a big thing. But what I was interested in asking you, although I'm not sure where I'm really getting at with this, but in your thesis you were talking about like different also theories of representation. Before you were talking about simulation and simulation as a specific term, and you came across like this image theory as well of Mitchell, and I was wondering like is there anything that would somehow apply to flight simulation somehow in order to understand what this is about?
Yeah, I think so. As far as I read Mitchell, he's interested not so much in the sort of the mechanisms of representation, if you like how does a representation represent its targets, but also how do we understand this, and how do we sort of harness different forms of representation in terms of realism or in terms of truthfulness and so on. And so he has a discussion of text versus image, and how these at different points in time have been conceived in different ways in regards to what is sort of most in terms of aesthetics, in terms of realism, and so on. And of course, I think simulation is a very obvious, a very obvious form of representation in regards to these ideas. Like for me, simulation is not a very specific form of representation. So I use models, and a model could be anything really. A model can be a description in text, it can be an image, it can be a computerized simulation, and so forth. But when we use the term simulation, we are sort of attaching to that term a lot of connotations about hard sciences, about objective truth, about like something almost like very engineering, like machines and so forth. So we are building around that term a particular understanding of what it means to simulate, that distinguishes simulation from, say, pictorial arts or something like that, right? And I think that's interesting also in terms of what we talked about before with the sort of aesthetics and the spectacular views, that you have this merging between this very scientific form of representation, right? That should be very accurate. It should be as realistic as possible. And we can see that here they have like this very minute. You have to push buttons and so forth, and put in numbers, and everything is almost dealt by manually and so forth. So it's extremely, it has an extremely high degree of fidelity. But then on the other hand, it looks nothing like a scientific simulation. It is also a piece of entertainment. It's a piece of spectacle that is more cinematic in a way, and that draws from this completely different tradition of representational forms in like representation in a leisure economy of sort, right?
Yeah, I guess this idea of spectacle is actually really interesting, because I think there's a lot of simulation behind the image going on, like big time. It's like there's some. So I'm showing you something. You should be sitting in this seat, actually. Yeah. So, and this is like this, and these are like the knobs behind you. I guess. I think. Oh no, those up there. They're like the so-called circuit breakers. So if any kind of electrical circuit doesn't work properly or not as it's supposed to, you can turn it off and turn some other one on. And there are like even some planes in flight simulation where like each single circuit and circuit breaker is simulated as well. So that can be to an extremely high extent, but you don't really see any of it. You just know it in a way. And of course, like this whole, like all the weather models that are also part of like if you look into the history of how the environment has been simulated in games, like flight simulators were the very first sort of games which actually needed a simulation of the weather. For all other kinds of games, that was way too resource consuming, which game developers didn't want to use. And all these things. So but then it's also like it's like, you're right, it's a spectacular way of using sort of scientific simulation in one way or another, and implement it into something to actually play with, right? Although
and the flight simulator itself becomes sort of the highest manifestation of what computer simulations can do in a way, right? Of course, we have these supercomputers and all that, but for the everyday person, for the layman, this is sort of the most advanced computer simulation we can think of, right? In a way.
Right. I need to inform you of something. We're 125 miles away from Copenhagen, and we need 100 miles to actually descend. So we will need to start the descent very soon. So I'm trying to descend and talk to you about another thing, but also I want to inform you, look, this is the Baltic Sea ahead of us. Ooh, I think this is the island of Rügen in Germany. This is like Hiddensee, which is an island without cars, and where you are really blessed if you have a chance to go on vacation there. it's like for Eastern Germans, this was like the holiday location. It used to be, which is quite interesting. And the thing is, like, we are flying from Berlin all the way up north, and from here on to Copenhagen, it's really like a blink of an eye. If you're doing flight simulation. So I want to, like, I've also said this before when we were, I really need, I shouldn't miss the point where we descend. So maybe I'll already start configuring it, and then I'll ask my other question. So usually you go down to 10,000 feet, and you push the button the moment you need to. Maybe it's also fine to, or let's go down to, actually you start your landing approach from 3,000 feet. Then you go like with 10 miles out, you go with 3 degrees, like slowly down until you reach the runway. And we'll do that. And we'll start descending now. You can see like this little things going down, but we will descend very slowly with like, let's say 1,800 feet per minute, which is also like a measure that you use. So, okay. And at 10,000 feet, we need to remember to switch on the landing lights. So maybe you can keep an eye on on your side. You can keep an eye on how our flight level is going. No, what I wanted to know is, like, you did, like, what I found really interesting in your work, and something that I haven't thought about like that before in terms of simulation is, and that's what I mentioned to you in the pre-conversation we had. And it's like you were making a case in your thesis that a game where I would say that's not a simulation, it's like a game, like The Witcher 3, which is super popular. It becomes a simulation of, or it is a simulation of gender to some extent.
Yeah.
Can you possibly unpack that somehow? What is meant by that? Just so that one can understand what that means, because I thought like this was actually extremely interesting, because usually when we think of simulation, we think of, oh yeah, there's a I don't know, a sword in the game, and it has like this and this sort of power to actually kill an orc or something, and that's like whatever is simulated. But how can gender be simulated? And I'm also asking this this question because, like, specifically the flight simming community is obviously very, very male oriented. And there's almost, very, very few female streamers actually doing flight simming. And maybe, like, I'm wondering if this is something that can also be found in the simulation. But first, The Witcher.
Yeah, so I think, so first of all, I think it's a good idea to distinguish between simulation games, such as this one, where the main purpose is sort of to run a simulation, and then the fact that all games are doing simulations all the time, right? They are simulating a lot of different things that you can find in the game, such as swords, such as worlds, or horses, or cars, and so what have you, right? And one of the things that they are, of course, also simulating is gender. Why not? You know, because in The Witcher 3, obviously, it is because it is a world in which gender exists. So therefore, the game must contain some kind of model of gender. And in that game, I think it becomes a very apparent simulation of gender, because you also have these two characters that you only have two playable characters, right? In The Witcher 3, you have the main protagonist, Geralt, and then you have his like an adoptive daughter, and these two you can play with, and you can sort of constantly compare what kind of access do you have, how can you operate the character, what kind of access do you have to the game, well, through that character, how is the character you know, what's like sort of semiotic layer, right? What the portrayal of the character visually, but also narratively and so forth. But in addition to that, I think, and that's a point I try to make in my dissertation, that you also have to you can of course delimit that conversation to the particular game, but you also have to account for the sort of how games are more culturally situated, and that sort of the long gendering of game practices that goes like really many years ago, right? That gaming has been a very gendered practice. You have of course the sort of masculinist gaming practices that we associate with hardcore gaming, but then you have a lot of things on the side that we usually neglect and think of, that's not proper games and so forth. And in that case, I guess Microsoft Flight Simulator plays into that long tradition of gendered gaming practices that I would sort of, it starts with these war games that were, run by middle-aged, wealthy white men who had the time to do these very big setups in their rooms where they could play with the figurines and so forth, and then they could go deep into actual historical battles and try to reproduce that. And I think that's the same you do when you play Microsoft Simulator, right? That's extremely sort of skilled and demanding kind of hobby practices.
Yeah, that's also a good way to tie back into what Marco just said before, that the flight simulator was like the first one came out in 1982. Even a couple of years before the first Windows. Yeah. So it's an older Microsoft product than the. And
it's so much a flight simulator as it is a pilot simulator in a way, right? Because there's a lot of things that are not part of the simulation. I was thinking most obviously, all the work that goes into making that aircraft depart. I saw that small person who were moving the bridge before, but there would also be the cleaners, there would be those who fuel the flight, those who handled the cargo. It's a particular perspective on flying that I think is very sort of male-like.
That's super interesting, because there's obviously also a plugin where you can simulate all the people really walking into the plane, and you simulate the people really like making the plane stand in the right spots, connecting all cables or whatnot, and all these kinds of things. People putting the luggage.
Are you operating those people then?
No.
So that's the point, right? That you are still you still have this sort of central figure in the simulation. That's the pilot, who is doing like the most important part, which is of course controlling the aircraft from when it before it leaves the ground and when it's back on. But there's many other actors involved in that. So it's also it's sort of, it makes that sort of, it centralizes this very specific participant in flying.
That's actually true, but it's also but there is what's there's like in a way there's like simulation games of all kinds, right? Even like to the extent that there's a rock simulator, which is supposed, or goat simulator, everyone knows it, and it used to be a joke in a way, but it's also not a joke to some extent. It is like, I think that's the case with always with simulation, that it's like with metaphors, well, which it is paradox. It is simulating something to some extent, and it is not doing it, and while it is not really being it at the same time, but still we take it for that. And there's like there's obviously also like other sort of simulators also in the media environment of the flight simulator, where you can be like an ATC controller, like an air traffic controller, which probably is also quite gendered in a way, that it's quite male driven. But I also know I do know of course like not male air traffic controllers as well, because that's a job which really depends on, maybe that's not a good description actually. I was saying, which really depends on you being like good at it, and that it doesn't necessarily require gender. But I see that I'm completely tapping into this whole like structural problem of representation. and in that regard. So but what I'm also wondering is like I really like, of course, I'm like a male. Obviously, I'm white. I'm sort of middle class-ish, I suppose, by being a assistant professor at a university. And I really like the flight simulator, but I would really love my flight community to not be only male people, because this is something that I don't know. I've never been like much of a boys club person in a way. And we have a problem. There's something which CDA is something that should not be happening there, so I wonder what that is. What I'm thinking is like, do you think, like, of course, like piloting itself is very masculine somehow? Oh no, we don't have a problem, it seems. Then of course the simulation of it is also gendered in a similar way. And is that like part of the cultural context that you're also speaking about in your dissertation, in where you're saying like how to, like, this whole idea of you is also like how to make sense of games, like how are they significant, how do they mean to us, and that has also to do is how they are embedded in culture. And that also means like not only the simulated software, we're not only talking about the simulated software, but also about how that which is simulated in the software, how that is already treated in culture, right?
Yes.
So I can probably wait forever, and the flight simming community will just never be like diverse to an extent that I would enjoy.
I think you should pick another game then.
So I'm like, I'm just in the wrong context.
You're in the wrong game. No, like totally. When I see this, I would love to play this game. I think this looks so awesome, but I would never even begin because I don't have the time. I don't.
Yeah. Who has time to? That's what I'm like thinking, right? Who has time to do that? If you're a game scholar and there's COVID.
Yes.
And that was a very
particular moment in time.
That was a very and that was something that you can't plan for. Yeah. That just happened.
Yeah.
And then you have like you're doing classes on in-game photography, then you have like an excuse to actually talk about it with your students, and then you're doing like a podcast series in order to motivate it, because like it's so time consuming that it's really like WTF. Like why, like, and obviously like also like if you see it from like a hobbyist perspective, right? I think that's also what you said like before, like who was actually able to have a hobby in the first place and
have a hobby that has absolutely no instrumental value. Like it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have a purpose other than, it's just nice to play. Yeah. You have no excuse to play this game. No, I need it because I have to, well, now you have an excuse. You have made excuses, but
well, but being a game scholar, I feel like my job is always providing me excuses to play specific games. Like or that it's not excuses, but it's also like in the moment you play a game for work, it really stops being fun. It's really not it's just like I still have to do that for like my work. One second. Here you can see the Øresundsbridge roughly. This is like the small island in front of Amager. This is Amager, where the airport is. Here you can already sort of see the airport.
It's so close now.
So we will now go into this direction over here, then we will turn over here, and then we will land. So it is also really nice because you can actually see where you will be in the future. And this is where you probably are already. But this is where the airport will be. And just to inform
and
you.
we're over there. Yeah.
Yes. And I think we actually have to descend a bit more because we are way up high. Now we are too high. So, but that will be all right. Maybe we can just briefly check out the weather information as well, because we need to know. Was it this button? Trust me, everything will be fine. No.
I really hope it, like next time I'm on an actual plane that's not what the.
This is always the beginning of something bad, right? If somebody says, "Trust me,"
yeah.
I'm immediately thinking like, "Oh well, I think I'm not gonna trust you." And so is this? So this is the weather report for Copenhagen, and we are getting it out here.
Oh.
And we are putting it up there. So I hope I can read it actually.
Oh, that's really nice. I like that detail.
Yeah, that's really weird. This is like the air pressure that we need. This is like 040 means like this is the direction from where the wind is coming, and 3 knots means it's almost no wind. So that's fine. But our plane needs to know that in order to configure nicely automatically how to do the landing approach. And we'll need to know the temperature, which I think is 14 degrees, 15 degrees. Can you confirm what is the temperature in Copenhagen now?
I'm inside.
Okay.
Wait. Sounds right, I guess.
Wait, we can also do this. But it doesn't say the temperature here. Or is this the temperature? 16? That could be the temperature. But I actually don't really know, to be honest. But I know enough to land us safely. So that's sad. So there's the bridge.
It's very clear.
So now is the time where I'm again like distracted and confused, and I not sure where to take this conversation up again, because I was I remember that I was disappointed that being in the flight simming community will maybe not be very, very diverse in a way that I would enjoy. We need to switch on the lights. And then we said, then we talked about like how it is anyway difficult to have time to play games. I don't remember how we got there.
It was just me saying that, you know, who have time for this game. You know?
Right.
Those are very particular people who have the time to play this game and be good at it.
Yeah, I don't know how that's really strange. Maybe we have like now that we are really approaching, it's like we're on 6,000 feet already, so we will start the landing from like 3,000 feet. And there's one last thing I would like to talk about as well, is like what I find fascinating with this flight simulator is, and I said it to you before as well, is that in a strange way, like you maintain your computer and your whole setup, and you really do it like weekly almost, because you have to go with every other update of like whatever driver could break your system. And this is really crucial for this like flight simulator, because it is extremely demanding on a technical level. And that is of course reminiscent of planes themselves, because planes are super demanding, like also like computerized devices in a way. But what I'm getting at is like they also consume a lot of energy. Like my computer is like really warm. It's like, so I'm checking not only the temperature of Copenhagen, but in the meantime I'm also checking the temperature of my processor, which is like around 70 degrees now. So it's fine. 70 degrees Celsius. So in light of the climate change and climate crisis, I'm like actually wondering, and that's something that actually exists with regard to real flights as well, that people have this thing. I told it to you in German, it's called Flugscham. I looked it up in English, it's flight shame. I'm not sure. You're like embarrassed of flying because you know you're destroying the environment somehow. And I wonder if this could be something that could also be developed with regard to computer games, to computer gaming, because just like if you're gaming, you're basically using energy for like nothing, like just for fun. Really, it's not instrumental in no way, unless I'm pretending that if you were with me on a real plane and we would be flying to Copenhagen and the pilot would like be incapacitated or whatever, you could have hopes that I could help you land the plane. But that's a really specific case, right? So it's not really instrumental at all. So so do you think this could be a thing with regard to games?
I think it is though, right? Isn't that already a discourse? You know, the sort of ethics in computer game consumption, computer game production, and how you're sort of you're participating in something that's really bad for the climate. I think that is a thing, and like as we talked about briefly before, we started. This is also, you know, in a way, it gives you access to something that you can't do anymore. Yeah, we're not allowed to fly, but now we can do it virtually, so that's really nice. That's sort of
that's sort of my excuse. That's what I'm thinking.
But on the other hand, it also reproduces this narrative of flying and adventure and something really exciting. And so, like, I was looking really forward to this trip because I thought, oh, it's been such a long time since I was on a plane the last. Of course, I've never been like in the cockpit of a plane, so this was already very, very exotic to me to sit here. But just like, oh yeah, having that trip, that's not something I've done for so long. But then it sort of reinforces that this is something desirable, that this is something that we should do and we should look forward to. And it doesn't, I guess, if we go back to the simulation, I guess it doesn't sort of, it doesn't simulate the long-term repercussions of this trip from Berlin to Copenhagen in-game or,
that's true.
Out of the game, yeah. So that could be a part of the simulation as well, right? Now you burned that and that much.
I'm like super tense, and this is where in the rehearsals for this I was asked, like, can you actually talk to people while being super tense? We'll request a full stop landing now, and I hope they give us the runway that we lined up for. Please. No! No! They gave us runway 4! Ah, I will ignore this. We will just land. So, they will complain.
Fly left downwind runway for left Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815.
Oh no, and it assumes that we do a go-around, but we won't, because I can't. Okay, now we are working against the law and all kinds of things. Yes. So, but how do you feel? How did this trip feel for you?
Oh, very nice. Yeah, it's like the best flight I've had ever. I'm usually not that entertained on flights, and I actually suffer from a bit of anxiety when I'm flying, and I had nothing of that, so that's a very big success.
Oh, that sounds very, very good. Yeah.
I hate flying actually. Like I like the anticipation of flying. I like to be in the airport. I like the atmosphere. But the moment the plane departs, I'm like, oh, so tense.
I can. Okay. So we will. I can promise you that we will land you safely. So I've done a couple of configurations in the meantime now. So we decided to ignore that we are landing on the wrong runway. They will definitely let us know that we ignored it. So
I wonder if, yeah, sorry.
That will be for sure. No, what?
I was just wondering if playing the flight simulator would sort of help people with a lot of anxieties, or like flying anxieties. If that would sort of because then you understand sort of the mechanisms of flying and holding the aircraft and so forth. Whether that becomes like a therapeutic sort of function or something, I don't know.
I will put in some brake power because we need to go down to. We will land at around 130 knots in speed, and we are still too fast. I would say it could help, because I'm also like I also easily feel uncomfortable when there's turbulences and stuff, and I don't really trust technology. Maybe it has to do with being a game scholar.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but like if I like I would say like thanks to this flight simulator, I at least know where some sounds are coming from, why they are coming right now, and that it's like I'm showing you what happens now. I will go full flaps, and now I will lower the landing gear.
Yeah.
And this
nice
makes,
view of it as well.
Yeah, I prepared that for you. So, yeah. Okay, and I need to turn.
See the runway now.
You can see the runway already, right?
So this would be the moment where I would be the most tense in real world.
This is there's some plane coming from there. Yeah. Okay. So, but the good thing is, to the left of the runway, you see 2 white lights and 2 red lights.
Yeah.
And this means we're exactly in the creamy middle path of the slope downwards. So we're perfectly lined up. So everything should be quite fine. I'm saying now. Let's see. So, but I guess you have landed from this, from this direction a couple of times.
Yeah.
In Copenhagen, right? So over there, I did totally ignore that, but you probably know also these like windmills, and
yes.
This should be the power plant.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of other. This is like Copenhagen up there. And here's the Amager Strand, like the beach of Amager.
Yeah.
So you can actually recognize things. Okay, I think I should focus now.
I think this is like the direction I'm most familiar with when I'm landing.
Somebody was doing weird things up there. It's okay, now I'm going out of autopilot. This is also like in flight simming. You can't do a full auto land. This is like not good. This is not very appreciated. So you have to do it manually.
100.
Oh no. Oh, now I understand why we were not supposed to land here.
40.
Oh.
30. 20. Retard. 10. 5.
Okay, we have full reverses on. I forgot to turn on the auto brake. Maybe it still works, so we missed the first exit.
121.9 Scandinavian Sierra
Manual braking. Reverses cut. That's all the things that you need to say. And then we're turning off the runway. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Copenhagen. Thank you for flying with us today, and we hope to see you soon. Please keep seated, keep your seatbelts fastened until we came to full stop. And yeah, so now we have to, it's really interesting, like so many things that I forgot to show you. But, for instance, now we can take up the flaps again. So this is what's happening there. We need to turn off the lights. And now we turn on the taxi lights only, and then we will ask ATC to taxi to the gate.
Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815 taxi to the gate.
Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815 taxi to gate Foxtrot 9er 0 using taxiway Bravo 4 Bravo. Cross runway tree 0 Bravo Romeo Victor.
Ah, luckily
Taxiing to
they
gate
brought up
Foxtrot
the
9er
signs,
0
otherwise I
using
would never
taxiway
find
Bravo
my
4
way.
Bravo. Cross runway tree 0 Bravo Romeo Victor Scandinavian Sierra Kilo 0815.
So now that you are landed, I was wondering if we can bring a question from the chat.
Definitely.
Yeah.
From Imogen, it's sort of like a longish question, I would say. Says, the question was made during about when you were like descending to land. But I was asking, I wonder if you might be able to share your thoughts on the crossing over an intersection of game design with other forms of art and design. Have you found in your work that it is quite distinct, or that it is shared elements? It has shared elements and theories with other visual art and design forms. I have no knowledge of game design myself, but I am interested in the way many different visual forms and mediums can be seen fluidly and as a part of a wider visual culture.
Do you want to take that, Ida?
Yeah, I can start at least.
Yeah.
I think I always and you might agree, Sebastian. I usually think of games, computer games, as like excessively intermediate. Like they borrow from all different kinds of media, and for me, it has something to do with the fact that they are not by themselves a medium. Like games is not a medium in as far as I see it, so they have like this kind of almost like anxiety and for that reason they borrow from all these different mediums like cinema and pictorial art, but also like textual forms and so forth, but still doing it in a way that is like a very sort of ambivalence towards these other mediums. So they qualify themselves, games qualify themselves in regards to other media, other popular media, but they are also ambivalent towards them. So they want to be a bit like cinema, but more realistic or more like immersive, and they want to be like textual narratives, but again more like describing everything. And so they have this kind of very ambivalent relationship to other media forms because they are not media in themselves. So that would be my sort of somewhat complicated answer to that, I guess.
I would totally say that games are media, but that's not the question. No, sure they are like sort of like they can be art. Like everything can be used for art to some extent, right? And games definitely too. I mean, there's also like there's a question if you consider if what do you mean by the question of games and art? Is it like the craft that goes into it? That's also kind of artful, right? In a sense. But then obviously there's also this whole like huge range of media art where it's about like coding and about like AI and whatnot, where this certainly also applies. So I would fully say that games can be like artful and art on very many levels. We've arrived.
Sort of related to what you were saying now and all the things that you said before. I was wondering because you said many times that this game is not instrumental. It's not like it doesn't have like a purpose, let's say. But I was wondering, as it is so realistic in so many things, is this game used to train pilots?
No, I don't.
And why is that? Because it feels very realistic.
Maybe it's so that the pilots are using even more complex simulators, and this is what's really interesting. This is probably why the question is actually really interesting, because this is tremendously complex for a computer game, but it's not even complex enough for a pilot. And that's what I would say. But what you can definitely say is that many people who play like flight simulators also aspire or even have like a private pilot licenses. as well. So they are also sort of pilots. It's this weird way that this really weird connection between, like, I don't know, soldiers loving to play Call of Duty, train conductors loving to play train simulator, and there's also many pilots loving to play flight simulator, which is a really weird thing, because why would you want to do in your spare time what you already do in the whole rest of your time?
Like an academic simulator where you just
sort of, yes, right. Let's have a paper writing simulator. That would be something that, like, or
but I would totally play that game.
Oh gosh, we need the stairs. I don't think that there's a jet bridge that can come here.
So while we have injured all of our passengers who left the plane without a staircase, I just wanted to say also thank you from my side. It's been a wonderful flight. I also have a couple of questions in mind. You know, as we were talking about simulation specifically, the idea of miniature kind of came to mind, right? Like all of these games that you know, but not only games, right? When we think of software like Google Maps, and I think at one point when we first talked, Sebastian, you mentioned that this is also pulling from Bing Maps, or there's some sort of connection with some sort of mapping software as well that is working in Flight Simulator. I don't remember if that was the case. So yeah, there seems to be like this kind of larger thing about, I don't know if it's control or mastery, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What do you think it's the relation to this idea of a miniature of the whole world, right? It's like this global planet.
I keep thinking about that obviously all the time. I mean, that's what you also have with like games like SimCity or like City Skylines, where you're like managing a city basically, and where this sort of really complex, I think you also called simulations a hyper object. Am I correct? I'm not sure if that was the case. Okay, maybe not. But they are like, so you're dealing with things that are so large that you cannot really make sense of them in a way as a large thing, but still and also you're part of them. So there's not even a position where you can oppose yourself to them in a way. So meaning, like, if you're like a citizen of a city, you will never have a real way to understand the city except from your own position. So there's no external kind of thing. And I think like these simulations somehow give you like sort of this position to actually be able to look at it from a slightly different perspective as well. And but with Flight Simulator, again, I think it's sort of different again, because you're putting yourself again in the same position that you'd also have outside of the simulator, right? So you're sort of dealing with the whole complexity of whatever can happen there, and you do not really have like an outside position. I know, like, that's quite interesting. I know a person that I wanted to interest in Flight Simulator, and I even got them the license and got them books to read up and how to get into this, and they had like real flight simulation anxiety because they had anxiety of the complexity that they would need to deal with. Even though there's like ways to make this much simpler to deal with. Like I'm playing this on a fairly complex level now, but so I'd say like some people probably enjoy the complexity and that they get a grasp of it somehow, and some people are probably also afraid of that in one way or another.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and that sort of ambiguity between, especially for many spatial games that is played in a very distinct space, right? That you have access, you have like this great access to something that's big and very complex, but on the other hand, it's so heavily rests on your ability and your skills to be able to actually really sort of I don't know, like get the most out of that accessibility, right? So there's like this weird form of ambiguity between seeing that whole thing and then, you know, am I skillful enough to actually to gain that proper access to it? I don't know. I was just thinking about when Google Earth first was popularized, and everybody they were like traveling around the world on Google Earth in this extremely casual way, right? And compared to this is also, it has some of the same sort of affordances, it has some of the same like mechanisms behind it, but it's like it requires this extreme level of expertise in comparison, and that expertise is so part of the what is interesting about it, or part of what makes people part of the motivation to play, right? That it's not just I can't just click on a map and go from one city to the next, I guess.
I've also been wanting to say something, but I forgot my thread.
Sorry.
No, that's not that. I just realized that
you were quite nervous in the trip. Is the adrenaline coming down, and now you're like recuperating from the.
I must say this is a really complex task to actually do all these things together. I thought this would be much simpler. So maybe it would be really good to do on a longerish flight where you would just bring the plane already into the air, then you have the time where you talk, and then you go out of the whole thing before landing, actually, because that's when you are the most calm and everybody can decide if they want to see the startup and the landing procedure or something like that. I'm not sure.
Well, in any case, we're really happy that you tried this very first experiment with us here at Screenworks. And do you already have like an idea where you're going to go next and who you're going to see with you?
That's like that's what I wanted to keep up for the audience. So if anybody is hearing this or seeing this later, or send a comment or drop me something on Twitter, Seb_Os_Mart, or on my website, sebastianmöring.com. I think one of the next flights should probably go from Copenhagen to somewhere in maybe Finland, Norway, maybe Great Britain, the Netherlands, Poland, Czech Republic, somewhere in the vicinity which could be reached like within an hour or two, and maybe want to make suggestions on whom to talk to next or whom to travel to next. And I'll be very happy about suggestions. So you can also just suggest yourself, and then we'll make a date, and then I will try to continue this.
Fantastic.
Nice.
So you heard it, game scholars everywhere in Europe for the moment. And everyone watching also on the video documentation on YouTube, feel free to reach out, and we look forward to also follow the next flights. And for us, we're actually going to be back in 2 weeks with Screenworks.
Yep. I mean, first, I just want to say thank you to both, to Sebastian and Ida. It's been a really interesting Screenwork. We've learned and we've like suffered a little bit also on the flight, but it was really nice to go with both of you. Thank you also for the audience. As Margot was saying, we will be back on the 7th of June with Ryan Jima. So please come and join us in 2 weeks.
We're back in games, actually. So we're going to be visiting a selection of video games in which Ryan and Gemma is going to look at the investigation. He's going to investigate the representation of the Middle East and North Africa. So make sure to come back and check that out. So Thank you once again. And thank you everyone who joined.
Thank you.
Bye from the flight deck. Thank you.